Dr. Greco here. Welcome to Ministry in a Minute. So we said yesterday that vision isn't about being right, it's about being righteous. We can't just tell people what to believe, but we have to explain to them why we believe it, why it matters so much for their faith to understand these truths and then live them out. And people need this picture. They need a vision. They need to understand where they're heading in their faith. Okay? So one of the great things that vision does, one of the things that we as preachers and teachers and leaders should be giving people besides the what is the why. We need to have people to understand why we believe what we do as Christians, why the Bible teaches what it does, and what that means for them. And one of the great verses I believe about salvation and doctrine in general comes in Ephesians 2. And there are two phrases in Ephesians 2 that give us an enormous heads up as to the why we believe what we do. Okay? Because in Ephesians 2, the Apostle Paul is telling the Ephesians that they've been saved by grace, that it is God's grace that saves them through their faith. Okay? And this is an important Christian doctrine. And then I've heard preachers say this all the time: we're saved by faith, we're saved by faith, we're saved by faith. What am I supposed to do with that? And why does it matter? Well, Paul gives us two whys in Ephesians 2. He says you're saved by grace twice in Ephesians chapter 2. And the first time he says it in verse 6, immediately after in verse 7, he says this: in order that, here's the why. It's as simple as it can be. In order that, in the coming ages, God might show the incomparable riches of his grace. Okay? One reason we need to know important doctrine, the vision that God's given for us, what we're trying to do is point people to God and glorify him. It's that simple. Okay? That's something that should be happening as a result of what we know. That's vision. Take what you know and use it to point people to God. The other one is in verse 10. Okay? He says in verse 10, you're saved by grace through faith. In verse 8, and in verse 10 he says, for, in other words, because we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, prepared in advance for us to do. So Paul says two very specific whys. You know what you know. You know this particular doctrine that you are saved by faith. Great. Remember, it is so that you can glorify God and that you can go out and do the right thing. It's not enough to know something. We've got to do something. Be who God's called us to be. Glorify him. Do good things for the people around you. And then we'll be living on our faith. More on vision tomorrow when we do another Ministry in a Minute.